I want to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Memphis Astronomical Society. We celebrate 70 years. Officially, I think it's November 13, but our speaker tonight is going to give an invaluable presentation. And I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. So I'm going to introduce our speaker here in just a minute. We got a couple items of business. After the presentation, we have a social gathering on the 6th floor, the Rhodes Observatory deck. So I'd encourage everyone to stick around. We got plenty of food, plenty of drinks. Help yourself. And if you'd like a tour of the Rhodes College Observatory, the plane wave, we'll have that available as well. So this is a special 70th edition of the Memphis Astronomical Society. So there are so many people to thank and so many people to acknowledge, and there's no way I could possibly acknowledge them individually one by one. We'd be here all night. So to kind of kick things off, I just want to just say a blanket statement to anyone over the years who has ever served on the board, served on a committee, given a presentation, been a part of programming, gone to an outreach event, shown somebody something through a telescope for the first time, shared the passion for astronomy, handed out a flyer, done work on our website, our marketing, our newsletter, or just in general been an ambassador of astronomy on behalf of the Memphis. Yeah, snacks, donuts. I mean, we could go on and on. But if you've done any of those things, just in general, you're a part of this, and you have helped essentially continue this organization over the last 7 decades. So, you know, this is a time when we look back on our founding, but it's also a celebration of what's been ongoing. So if you would please, as we kick things off, normally we do an applause at the end. If you would just give everybody an applause who's been a part of the Memphis Astronomical Society over the years. Thank you very much. It's an honor and quite frankly, humbling to be a part of an organization like this. And given the turnout tonight, just thank you and welcome. So again, we are the Memphis Astronomical Society. We're a nonprofit public service organization promoting interest in education, astronomy, and related sciences. We have a charter. I'm not going to read it, but our speaker tonight is going to give you some insight into the founding of our organization. I held this document in my hand last year. It's becoming practically a historical artifact. It's in our safety deposit box. But we got a very important talk tonight from a longstanding member. I'll announce him in just a second, and he'll give you some more insight into the founding of our organization. If you would like to join the Memphis Astronomical Society, all you got to do is scan that QR code. It's on our banner out front there too. You can do it if you're watching us online. We're getting into the 21st century here, where you can use your iPhone. You can also go to our website, just click the join button. You can either subscribe to our email list or join as a member. And of course, we highly recommend that you join as a paying member. So there's a lot of benefits to being part of our organization, memphisastro.org. Got some new members to announce. Speaking of which, again, I won't put anybody on the spot tonight. I'm just going to call your name. James Ball, Harry Freeman, Mark Findley. Thank you. Finally, Mark, you're a part of our organization. He's come to several of our outreach events. Mark Ruhlman, welcome. Melissa Krizan. Oh, sorry. She's here. Well, everybody say hello to Melissa. And I believe I got one other one. I don't have a slide for him, but Ron Peck just paid. So, Ron, finally, Maryland facing down. So, welcome everybody. Tomorrow night, not looking good, but we will officially make the call tomorrow morning. It's our Village Creek Star Party. This, of course, is our semi-annual outreach event, Village Creek State Park. The advanced forecast is not promising. We'll make the go, no-go call tomorrow, depending on weather. If by some miracle it does clear up, again, it's in Forest City, about an hour's drive due west, exit 242. We typically meet there around 5:15 for dinner, and then the indoor program starts around 7. If you have a telescope and you can bring it out, we always need telescopes for this event. So tentatively plan on that and wait for the cancellation notice tomorrow morning. Other events coming up. So I didn't have a bullet point for this, but we'll be at Bobby Lanier Farm Park, correct, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, Bobby Lanier Farm Park, that's next Saturday, the 18th. right here in Germantown. Always a good turnout. So again, if you have a telescope, bring it out. If you know somebody wants to get out and look at things in the sky, that's always it's a really good event. So that's next Saturday, the 18th, and then we've got some events coming up in early December, dark sky observing events at Burton's Pinecrest. And we have a new dark sky site too. I'm formally announcing it tonight, Astroflats. Some of you know about this. This is a members only observing site, one of the benefits of being a member. So, and it's not just when we schedule it, but it's available 24/7. So if it's a Tuesday night and it's clear and you want to get out and do some dark sky observing, Astroflats is your spot. And it's been getting a lot of use over the last few months. Meryl's the administrator.
Yeah, if you go to the Astrophotography Slack channel, there's a channel under how to sign up, get the code. We have a gate that's a kind of code that you'll use to get in.
So go to the Astrophotography Slack channel.
If you're not on it, let me know and I'll get you in.
Right, Meryl's your guy. He's the membership Nazi administrator. So he takes care of that. And if you need help getting connected with Astroflats.
26 names.
Yeah, so, but this is big benefit of being a member, Astroflats. And again, 24/7, you want to go on a Tuesday night, you want to go on a Thursday night, Saturday night, whatever. Check out the MeteorWrite. It's not going anywhere. We've decided we're going to continue. You're also going to hear about the origins of the MeteorWrite in the upcoming presentation, but check out this month's edition. A lot of valuable information. And we've got our next astrophotography focus group meeting, the M.A.S. they're called, on November 15, 8 o'clock. Is that correct? And again, via Zoom, members only. Our past meetings are on our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube at Memphis Astronomical Society. A lot of valuable information. And of course, yeah, if you're a member, we'll email you the Zoom link, November 15th. The group's doing some really exciting things. So they come a long way. Okay, another item of business we got to knock out here. It's November, fall elections. So I'm going to ask the membership now. We've nominated 3 new members to serve on the board of directors next year. Don Farge, Patrick Mitchell, I believe they're here, and then Bradley couldn't make it tonight, but he's a candidate to be our next secretary. So does someone want to make a motion to close nominations?
Well, we close the nominations?
Second.
Shouldn't we ask?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I skipped a step. Past president here. Let me back up here before we make that move. Is there anybody else who wants to be nominated to serve on the board next year? Is there anybody else who wants to nominate somebody to serve on the board next year? Okay, so Bill Wilson raised his hand. He wants to be treasurer again. I'm kidding. Welcome, by the way. It's good to see you guys again.
So if there are no further nominations, I move we close nominations.
So Rick made the motion.
I'll second that.
Actually, Freddie and, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You've been nominated, sorry. You don't have a vote anymore, you're in. All right, we'll make it official next month. Again, thank you everybody for volunteering. Okay, eclipse glasses, we got them out front. Again, we got another one coming up. And now's the time to get them because we got plenty of eclipse glasses. Once we get into the spring, we get closer to the event, they're gonna go pretty quick. So if you're planning on checking this out on April 8th, you can pick up a free pair tonight. One of the benefits of coming out. I have a video. I don't have time to show it. Some of you have asked about our adventure in Ely for the annular eclipse. Rick and I went over and did some work for Exploratorium last month, and we had a great time. Very successful. Here comes Rick.
Well, you only get one of these t-shirts if you actually went there and did that, and there are only 2 of these in the world. And here's yours.
Outstanding. I love it. How about that? Yes, sir. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we did this partly as a labor of love, but we also got paid. So I got a little bit of business to take care of here. So essentially, through our contacts at the Memphis Astronomical Society, I'll spare you the details, but they needed telescope operators. So we were essentially hired to do the work for Exploratorium and broadcast the live feed, and then whoever picks up the feed they can use it however they see fit. We were the backup site. So the primary site was Valley of the Gods in Utah. And the idea was if they're clouded out, then we'll just go to Ely. However, once again, serendipity plays a role because the Weather Channel was in Ely and Klamath Falls was clouded out. So the gist of it is we were the first site in the path that was clear. So we got some really good coverage. And during max eclipse, the Weather Channel showed several minutes of footage of the full annularity of the eclipse from the Exploratorium feed that was provided by telescopes from Rick Honey and Ann Viano of the Memphis Astronomical Society. That's pretty cool. Oh, we flew. All expenses paid.
Did you take your equipment with you?
We had to ship it.
I shipped all the equipment.
Right.
Oh my gosh, wow.
I've got a documentary video coming out on everything. About halfway there. Yeah. So I'll have that ready by Thanksgiving, hopefully. But again, this was we got a check for this. So, and he did a lot of work, and he really stepped up big. And I got to tell you, I was there the entire time as he was setting up and tweaking this, and he really did the Memphis community and Memphis Astronomical Society proud. So he deserves a big thank you. And so, with that, I would like to formally present my colleague, Mr. Rick Honey, on behalf of the Exploratorium and NASA and yours truly, a check for services rendered in the amount of $3,000.
Guess that makes me a professional astronomer.
And remember, you got to pay taxes on that. 1099. So, thank you.
Yeah.
But, all right. All business covered, and that brings us tonight to our main presenter. And our speaker tonight, he really doesn't need an introduction. Some of you know him, many of you know him. For those of you who don't, he's been a long-standing member of the Memphis Astronomical Society. And the way I like to start it is in 1957, Russia launched Sputnik. And it was a scary moment in world history. I remember my dad telling me stories about seeing Sputnik go overhead and how concerning it was. Our speaker tonight was not worried because he was too busy developing a fake ID so they could join the Memphis Astronomical Society before he was too old to do so. By his own admission, probably the last time he was too young to join anything, but certainly not the last time he's ever crafted a fake ID. But Dr. William J. Busler has been a long-standing member of our society. He's a graduate of Christian Brothers High School, and he's also a graduate of Christian Brothers University with a BS in chemistry in 1966. He graduated from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center with a Ph.D. in physical biochemistry in 1977. And he was also the Planetarium director at the Memphis Pink Palace Museum from 1972 to 1980, where he oversaw the installation of a 50-foot Minolta planetarium. He taught biochemistry at UTHCS. He received an award for Outstanding Teacher, University of Tennessee in 1969. He was selected for Who's Who Among America's Teachers, named Outstanding Young Men of America. He was the chairman of the chemistry department at Christian Brothers University for 15 years, and he taught at Christian Brothers until the year 2011, where he received Professor Emeritus of Chemistry status from 2011 forward. He taught astronomy. He taught an astronomy course at Duke University's Talent Identification Program in 1989. And he also presented 3 astronomy lectures in Australia, in Melbourne, Sydney, and Wollongong in 2006. He's been a member of the Memphis Astronomical Society since 1957. He served on the board of directors from 1959 to 2016. He was president in the 1970s, the 1980s, and in 2015 and 2016. And he's the author of An Amateur's Guide to the Messier Objects and the Short Course in Astronomy. And by the way, if you're looking to get started in astronomy and get a basic background working knowledge on astronomy, it's on our YouTube channel, taught by Dr. Busler. Highly recommend you check out that resource. He was awarded President Emeritus status for the Memphis Astronomical Society in December 2016. And he had an asteroid named after him in 2019 by the late, great Roy Tucker. So with that, please help me give a warm welcome to our presenter tonight, Dr. William J. Busler.
Thank you, Jeremy. After that, I can't wait to hear this. Okay.
I need to get some mic'd up here in a minute. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. I better hold up till you get the electronics fixed up.
We're going to do a better job this time of recording than we did last time. So put that on. You put it right on your glasses.
Okay. I may be moving those around, so I don't know.
Oh, wait, actually, put it right here.
Yeah, that's going to stay put.
Right on your name tag and put that in your pocket.
Okay.
And I believe
Will pants pocket work? That's all I got.
what was yours?
Okay.
That's a lot.
Thank you. Okay, it sure is good to see so many of my old friends and astronomy buddies here. I haven't been to a meeting in quite a while in person. I've seen a few of them online, but you don't get a very good view of who all is there. So I appreciate you all coming out, and I'm glad to see you, and I'll be talking with you more afterwards. This presentation, I think it's on. There we go. Yeah. Early history. By definition, tonight, the early history is from the early 1950s to the early 1970s. So when I turn the corner into the 1970s, you'll know it's just about over. In 1952, Dwight Eisenhower, Ike, was running for president, was elected, and at that same time, Frank Goad Clement was the governor of Tennessee. I've put a few little things in here for those of you who've never heard of the Astronomical Society. You probably heard of some of these folks, and you can tie them together in the historical context. In 1952, the Teenage Astronomy Club was formed, and Jon Buhler was the president of it for two reasons. He had a big backyard and he had the biggest telescope. So he was the president, and Bob Ritter was the vice president, and Tom Hartzog was the treasurer. And the Teenage Astronomy Club had quite a bit of goals and everything, a lot of which wound up in the charter later on. I won't bother reading all those to you. This will be online, and you can pause it if you want to, or delete it, whichever. In the 1953, during the annual Perseid meteor shower, part of what you're going to notice tonight is that things were different back then, not just hair and clothes and everything, but the Commercial Appeal did 7 articles, 17 column inches that week on the Perseid meteor shower, not counting a humor column. And the three fellows there in that picture, there were, that's Bob Ritter in the front. I won't identify everybody. This was the humor column on the front page of the Commercial Appeal. And those were, he always had a different angle about something than what you might expect. His whole thrust, Liddell Sims, in this article was to make a whole lot out of the fact that there weren't any girls in the club back then, and that if the boys just would grow up a little bit more, they'd start seeing flashes of light that had nothing to do with meteors. So that's basically what that article was about. Towards the end of 1953, in October, they got together and filed for the corporation status under the laws of the state of Tennessee. And these were the signatories: Jon Buhler, who was the president, L.S. Hartzog, Tommy Hartzog, Bob Ritter, and Milton Buhler. Now, the Milton Buhler, well, Tommy Hartzog, some of you may remember the old Hart's Bakery. He was the Hart's of Hart's Bakery. And that was L.S., and Tommy was his son. And Jon Buhler was the son of Milton Buhler, who was with the Dixie Lily Flower Company. So they probably knew each other before that. And one thing led to another and all kinds of connections. Here was the statement of the purpose of the Astronomical Society, which I think is good to review every now and then. They're for the purpose of studying and advancing the general interest of the community in astronomy, the science which treats of celestial bodies, their positions, magnitudes, motions, distances, constitution, physical condition, their mutual relations, their history, and their destiny. And that's what we've tried to adhere to, more or less, sometimes more, sometimes less, over the last 70 years. And we'll skip over some of the information there and get down to the actual signing of the thing. The application was submitted on the 24th of October in 1953, but it was actually signed on the 13th day of November 1953. So we really should be celebrating our anniversary over a 3-week period, sort of like the way Mardi Gras just takes up a whole month or so. But this got us off the ground and on our way. And you might be wondering, let me back up here just a second. You notice whose name is not on there, and that's mine. A lot of people have the mistaken impression that I was one of the founders. I was a hanger-on, sort of a groupie, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. But there were other people who were not signatories, who were very active back then. And as far as I know, there's only one still left. And we'll see a little bit more about him very shortly. Michael Snowden was one of not the signatories, but he was in on it from the beginning and had a lot to do with the Constitution or the Charter of Incorporation being formed. And as luck would have it, he happens to be in town this week and is right here. So Michael is one of our very first members. And in fact, he was the president when I finally got to join, and I pestered him mercilessly about many things, but we'll see about that very shortly. Michael has graciously agreed to identify some of the people in these pictures. I've got about 10 pictures that I have tentative names for, but he knows who they all were. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, since he was not many of our members have ever gone on to become professional astronomers, but Michael has. And Roy Tucker was the other one until tonight, and now Rick has been officially named professional astronomer. So there's our.
All right, I'll just not take more than 5 minutes from his talk, because I'm really eager to hear that. Yes, I'm Michael Snowden, and what a joy to be here. I come to you from the southern skies. I come to you from New Zealand tonight. Oh, wow. That's where my astronomy career took most of, not entirely, mostly. But it's really wonderful to be here, and it's quite a coincidence and quite a thrill. I'll give you a brief story of the fill-in of what he was saying in each. Yes. I was a member and had been with that group there, you see. And by the way, I'm looking around all of you tonight, and I don't see any 15-year-olds in here tonight. When I was a member, that's all you were 15-year-olds and 13-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Well, so there we were. My dad was a lawyer, had been, and he had a law office here. And Stuart McCloy called me in one time, who had been my dad's partner. And I'm 12 years old, and he sat me down and said, Michael, I'm very formal. I understand that there's a new club that you boys are forming, and it's very important that you get incorporated. I said, what's incorporated? He says, well, you get access to tax deduction. I said, what's tax? When he said, it's important that you do it, and I'm going to see to it it's done, and I want you to get a liaison with your other members and get this established. That was in '52. I was 12. And so others took over and incorporated it. And that was Stuart McCloy who actually dragged me into his office when I was 12. And all these kids were, well, I think the oldest one was maybe 16 at most. So we were kids. And so it's wonderful to see what the society has done for me, by the way, because it really was, it's a stimulus for teenagers, at least it was then. And it really did, we used to meet every Friday evening in Jon Buhler's backyard to talk about astronomy, and the kids could talk lectures to each other and do all the things. We then given a little space in the Memphis Museum basement room where we could meet. We did that for quite a while, and on it went from there. But I just, on a personal note, let me just tell you that this society, for me as a 12-year-old, really played quite a major part as a launching platform for me to pursue astronomy professionally, which I subsequently did. I was at observatories all over the world, and I did my bachelor's degree at Vanderbilt and graduate studies in New Zealand, where I still live. So I've been an astronomer, and it launched right out of this group right here, and I just feel like it's just a wonderful experience to be back amongst all of you tonight. Well, that's a fill-in. I want to hear what Bill has to say, because he has a lot more knowledge about it than me, and I really would love to just point to people,
Okay.
if I can, and tell you
Yeah.
who
All right,
got a
Jim.
point.
You got, that's the arrow advancing, and the little button is the pointer.
Well, do you want me to advance, or do you want to advance?
Well, I think it'd be simpler if you're talking about them for you to advance.
Bob Ritter,
Mm-hmm.
then Jon Buhler, of course, and this would be Philip Wright.
Mm-hmm.
And this would probably, I don't recognize that backyard, but.
That's Bob Ritter's
That's
side
Bob
yard.
Ritter's backyard.
Yes.
Okay, 114 South Lawrence.
Mhm.
Okay, and go fence.
Mm-hmm.
That's Bob Ritter, and that's Jon Buhler's backyard, where I spent much of my youth. There's John.
Mhm.
And
Can you comment on the telescope and are you going to comment on the telescope?
I don't know anything about that telescope.
Well, all of them were very long focal length, because that was easier to grind, and none of them had equatorial mounts and appeared to be very rickety, so.
Did these kids buy them?
No, they built them. But
We built-
keep going, there's some pictures of that.
An old rug, or we got something else, and we
Yeah.
put them all together. And there we are doing it, by the way.
Mhm.
And these, that little boy is Philip Wright. Can't recognize him, but that would be Jon Buhler, and that's Bob Ritter. And this is what, we had a little backyard clubhouse that John's dad built for us and let us build. And we, in the clubhouse, that's where we gave our talk. But we also did this. We also had a little place where we put together optical things and telescopes and parts. We built our own. So there we are doing that. More of the same. That's Tommy Hartzog in the back. And
Who was taking the photos?
yeah, I don't know that, as a matter of fact. It wasn't me, but
Somebody
somebody had a camera.
Mhm.
Okay, this is a wonderful picture, because this is the heart of the teenage kid. That's me over there.
Mhm.
That's Bob Ritter. I remember him, but I can't tell you his name. There's Tommy Hartzog, Jon Buhler. Yeah, this fellow I remember so well, but not his name. And some of the others, Philip Wright. I remember this little boy real, and I can remember these little boys. They're about 12. Griselle, I think, her name is something like that. These little Corviers showed up as well. That was really good. Oh, that's what we dealt with, just these little small telescopes. This was a purchased one.
A 3.5-inch skyscope.
Skyscope, yeah.
Our banner's obscuring the title up there.
Oh,
but-
okay.
yeah.
Oh, yes. And this would be the clubhouse you're looking at, I think, isn't that right, Bill?
I don't know.
I think it probably is the clubhouse and to the left there.
Mhm.
And where was that located?
3796 Central, I still remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, the wonderful picture. His name is Ned, Ned, oh, I didn't mean to do that. The wrong button. This boy is Ned Norris,
Mhm.
and that's Bob Ritter, and that's that little telescope. I think this is Jon Buhler's backyard again, where we all used to hang out. Now, this is historical. You know what that is, Bill?
That's where they're digging the foundation for the 12-inch telescope.
Jon Buhler's dad decided to give him the biggest telescope in Memphis, which is a 0.3 meter reflective telescope purchase. And there they are, they're digging the foundation for cement for the foundation for this telescope. And once again, that's That's Philip Wright, Jon Buhler, and Tommy Herzog. There it is.
Oh, wow.
All right. Oh, this was the thrill of the event, the biggest telescope in Memphis. And there it was. We owned it. I mean, it was
Block drive and everything.
Yeah, I still remember that it was John's dad who built this for us, so we could get to the Newtonian focus. Had a nice clock drive, and it guided and did a lot of nice things. Oh, oh my God, how did you get that?
Now whose yard are we in?
Wow. Well, I put this together as a 13-year-old in a backyard, in my backyard, in Sweetbriar Road, which was a pretty rural place in those days with very black skies. And I just tacked all these things together and put a little telescope in it and called it the Sweetbriar. I was 13 when I did that. I don't know where you got that from. Well, this is one of the newspaper articles, and these are just the boys that was in that newspaper article. There's another picture.
And David Riley lived right across the street from me, so that didn't hurt either. So
These are the same boys again. That's Bob Ritter, Jon Buhler, Herzog, and Philip Wright. I never knew what happened to Philip Wright. I knew the others quite for a long time. You want to carry on at this point?
yeah, I was going to pick up with the planetarium history there.
Thanks again.
Okay, well, thank you. Normally, I just talk during this part between slides, but since this will very likely be the last time I ever do this, I'll be 79 next month. So the 80th anniversary is going to be up to somebody else. But so I decided to write some things down so you'd have them and recollections. Jon Buhler went before the Memphis Park Commission and proposed that the city and the Park Commission and the Board of Education build a planetarium because they had seen some out of town. They talked with 35 civic leaders, and that's kind of an interesting thing in itself. I'm not sure we still have 35 civic leaders, but anyway, they talked with them and the museum director, and they were able to, with the help of their fathers, take a number of people around who had money to other cities and show them their planetariums and try to whet their appetites that Memphis ought to have something like that. And then they arranged for Spitz Laboratories to put on a demonstration here in the museum in February '54. Now, they brought that A1 star projector with them and the console to operate it, and a 24-foot canvas dome that really looked like a parachute because it had ribs all over it and it was made out of canvas. And they set up that demonstration right there in the Memphis Pink Palace Museum. And it says here, the Memphis Astronomical Society is pushing a plan to raise money to buy one of the machines. Memphis Astronomical Society back then, I don't think had anybody out of their teens, but it was, that's who was doing all of this back then.
Where did these kids go to school?
Some east, some central.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think White Station existed then. I think it was a little bit like, yeah, a lot of east. That was the closest. But that wasn't that unusual then, I don't think. Anyway, they set up this demonstration and everybody went for it, and the city decided to buy it, and they did. And this was a reflection on that demonstration, an article in the paper about it. And then the Press-Simeter, the afternoon paper, had Jon Buhler actually write an article. It says, as told to the Press-Simeter. Well, it was handed to him. I saw it. He wrote the thing up in longhand on a legal pad and handed it in to them, and they pretty much printed it as it was, which is unusual. That's Jon Buhler there says he was an East High student. So he got that set up and running. Here's the expenditure for that. The planetarium projector itself was $4,775, and the dome was $1,400. Yeah, when we replaced all of that in 1977, it cost a whole lot more than that. But that kept us going. It's opened in October 1954, and their overhead was very low because the boys from the Astronomical Society actually ran it and gave all the lectures for 3 more years until they finally did hire a director in 1957 to operate the planetarium. And it was used for 23 years until the new Minolta Planetarium was installed in 77. That's probably a record for a Spitz A1 to be in service that long. And here's they didn't throw this in the trash. They set up an exhibit at the museum outside the entrance to the present planetarium. And this was the A1 star projector. It's a dodecahedron. It's didn't have lenses for all the stars like modern planetariums do. Armand Spitz was dedicated to trying to make planetariums available to everywhere. So he did one that had just a light bulb in the center, and on the 12 faces of the dodecahedron, there were holes drilled, one for each star that you could see, and they had to put in the holes were proportional to the brightness of the star. And the first magnitude stars would have been the size of saucers if they had not put a lens over them to focus the light back down some. So they were only about 1 inch in diameter, which wouldn't fool anybody into thinking you were outdoors, but it gave a much more realistic impression of the sky. I won't go over all the details of it, except to point out that the planets were mounted on that little disc there up close. We can see that. This was called the geocentric Earth projector. So you could look at the sky as though you're inside the Earth looking up through the ground into the sky. I'm not sure exactly what you're supposed to learn from that, but this was either the sunrise or the sunset projector over here. You could swing it around on the stalk there and pick one or the other, but you couldn't have them both during the same show. And this was the console. It was all low voltage stuff with things plugged into it. And I used that one for many years myself. And they do have a nice little history of it there, and giving credit to the Astronomical Society for developing it and putting it in and operating it. Now in the very late 1950s, December 31st, 1956, we had $57 in the bank, and we got our tax exempt status, which was great. We didn't have to pay any taxes on anything, but we did have to file a report every year, the Form 990A. You had to turn that in to let them know you were still around, and to make sure that you weren't doing anything you weren't supposed to, like selling moonshine on the side or anything like that. So, and this is important to know, everything you've seen so far was before I was ever involved with the Astronomical Society. So just to give credit where credit is due, everything you saw so far was done by others, with Michael and his buddies doing all of that heavy lifting. In March 1957 was when I was introduced to astronomy by a boy down the street who went to school with my younger brother. And he had gotten a merit badge in astronomy at his Boy Scout troop at St. Anne's over on Highland and Spotswood. And he brought a telescope up to our house one night and started showing us things. The M.A.S. member who did that was George Turner, and he will come up again later on. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay. Yeah, he brought, it was a 1.5 inch refractor that he got from Boy's Life magazine. It was the Boy Scout book, and it had ads for everything in there. You get rich selling Wolverine ointment and that thing, and you could buy a telescope. Well, he did. And we saw Venus and Jupiter, and I'd never seen anything like that before. I didn't even know where they were in the sky, but then when I saw them through the telescope, I was hooked. And I started keeping my logbook that night. And it's the first day, March 3rd, 1957, I logged Orion, the Big Dipper, and Leo was the constellations I learned that night. Sure, what's happening? There we go. In the summer of that year, I started attending Astronomical Society meetings. At that time, they were meeting in the basement meeting room at the Pink Palace Museum. They called it the club room, and they would let it out for any sort of nonprofit organizations to meet down there. So that's where we met. And Michael was the president. When I joined, we had 35 members, and I couldn't join. For one thing, I didn't have a telescope, and that was a requirement then. You had to have a telescope so that you could be of use to them. And I was too young. As Jeremy pointed out earlier, that's probably the last time I was too young for something, but I had to be 13 because of the laws of Tennessee. That was the minimum age to belong to a corporation. So you had to be 13. And our meetings were, by today's standards, pretty long. One meeting, I saved the program from that. We had 4 major talks, all given by high school kids who had done a lot of work with their encyclopedias, nothing online. They had to get encyclopedias, go to the library, write down stuff, and they'd bring in these sheafs of paper and give talks. Worlds in collision, making a 6-inch telescope, stellar evolution, and problems of planetary flight before there was any planetary flight or even an Earth satellite. So that was the kind of meeting we had, which would, as you might imagine, went on for some little while. And I'm trying to figure out why this. Okay. And then after the meetings, we would sit around and go through Duncan's astronomy, which was a very college level, not particularly imaginative or humorous or anything. It was a straight-laced astronomy book, and we would go through it, and Michael, bless his heart, would go through it page at a time, and I must have had 1,000 questions on every page. And I remember one night he was patiently explaining to him that the orbits of planets are elliptical and not egg-shaped, as I came in with the idea. He said, and he hit it right on the head. You must have had a book that said that. And that was the case. And I got it out of my head that they were egg-shaped. It's elliptical. But he was very patient with that. And I'm grateful to this day for all of that help I got then. Because, if you want to be good at something, you get somebody who's good to help you with it. So, and that was my strategy back then. Then after that, and I said, that's why we had the meetings on Friday night, because after that, we have a Saturday to recoup from all of that and not have to go to school. Then, as Jeremy pointed out, October 4th, 1957, Sputnik 1, which kind of changed everything. And at that time, space travel, rockets, satellites, and everything were part of astronomy because it was stuff up in the sky that we could look at. It hadn't separated into what it is now. It was strictly part of astronomy, and we took part in it. We were going to catch up December 5th, the day after my birthday, with the Vanguard satellite. Well, it made it up about a foot off the launching pad, fell back down, burst into flames, and collapsed. Man, I took that very hard because the Sputnik itself was bad enough, but then when we couldn't even catch up with our beautiful, sleek rocket, that was a terrible thing. But finally, that triggered Ike, who was president by then, to, and had been for some time, to authorize Wernher von Braun and the others at the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama at Huntsville, this was before NASA, to authorize them to splice together some military rocket hardware and get us at least our foot in the door or our rocket into space. And that Explorer 1 was a really good thing to have up there. I mean, I've got a picture of von Braun and Van Allen holding this Explorer thing. It was only about 4 feet long or so. It looked like an oversized bottle rocket. And the thing had discovered what's now known as the Van Allen belts. So we were back in the running. And backing up just a little bit, that was when I was finally old enough. I still have my welcoming letter from the Secretary Treasurer then. Here's what I was getting into. The dues are $3 a year or 50 cents per month. And it wasn't really ever $3 a year. It was always 50 cents a month. Every meeting started out with the treasurer sitting there at the table and people plunking down 50 cents and getting their names checked off the list so that they were current. And Sky and Telescope was $2.50 a year, and the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada handbook was 75 cents plus 6 cents postage and handling. So things are different. December 9th that year, I still have the program for this, Harlow Shapley came to Southwestern and gave a talk called Astronomy in the Age of Genius. And I've got to admit, I didn't get a whole lot out of that, but that was, I was still just 13, so just barely. In January 58, we had a professor from Memphis State come over and give us a talk on how rockets and satellites worked. And he was one of these kind of blowhard professors that if he didn't know something, he'd make it up. And he was saying that the way a rocket works is that the exhaust pushes against the air, it pushes against the Earth's atmosphere. And he picked up a broom out of the corner and shoved it against the wall and said, it's just like that. The rocket exhaust pushes against the air and that makes the rocket go forward. Well, me being me and 13 and not too bright in some areas, I put my hand up and he says, yes, Sonny. And I said, I have a book here that says that that's a common misconception and that the rocket operates on Newton's third law, which you had taught me not too long before that, and the equal and opposite reaction. And besides, there isn't any air up in space anyhow. And he got all red. He came stomping down the aisle to where I was sitting, and he said, who wrote that book, Sonny? And I showed it to him. It was Werner von Braun. And everybody started laughing, and I thought they were laughing at me, but it turns out it was a little different. Yeah.
Can you share the name?
He's dead now, but his family is not, and I don't want to get sued. I'll tell you after. Okay. Also in January, we started a Moonwatch program here at Southwestern then. Dr. Jack Taylor and Ace Emery, Almond C. Emery, went by Ace rather than Almond for some reason. And he built a bunch of these little telescopes. You could buy a telescope that was about a foot long. He built bases for them with a mirror so you could sit at a card table with this telescope on it, look down into it comfortably and look at the sky and make timings of when the Sputnik went over. Because at that point, they didn't have that many satellites up there. We had the Sputnik 1 and then 2 with the dog on it. And then by the end of January, we had the Explorer. So we did all the watching and timing and everything. And we turned in all our records to, by then it was NASA, and we got a commendation. I can't find that anywhere, but somewhere we got a written commendation from NASA for our work on determining the orbits of the satellites. Because back then, you know, they didn't know about the irregularities in the shape of the Earth, and that a number of things. Was it
Gravity well.
Yeah, just discontinuities in gravity and so on. We didn't know about that, and our observations helped to straighten that out. At that time, John Flippen was the president. He was for 6 years, and then much later on, 5 more. Context again. Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire, married his 13-year-old cousin Myra. And I graduated from the 8th grade. I think probably before Myra did. In March ~59, I had been a member for about a year and a half or so, and I was invited to join the board. There was a vacancy, and even though our elections were in December, I was invited to join the board then. And in June of that year, we moved the meetings over to here. And here is a picture of Dr. Taylor and Dr. Framath, who was also a professor here, had to be carted off to jail for being naughty with some of the students. And this is John Flippin, our president, and this is me and my brother Tom. And this is his apparatus that he was getting ready to take to the Canary Islands to observe a total solar eclipse. Now, Dr. Taylor, I got a little bit more on him here. He was a great physics professor, and I still use some of the analogies that I stole from him about all kinds of things when I'm giving astronomical presentations. So he was just top notch, but he had a peculiarity, and that was he pretended he was German, and he would say physics instead of physics, and spectroscopy, and he'd roll that off. But I happen to know that he grew up in Memphis, and he went to Southside High School. And the way I happened to know that was the lady who lived behind us over on Reese was one of his teachers. And so I had it straight from the teacher's mouth. He had government grants to go on solar eclipse expeditions. And I never could quite figure that out until sometime later. And it turns out that what he was doing after this Canary Islands thing, I think that was one of the first ones where they went to, he was working on a government project involving Sidewinder missiles. You remember Sidewinders? They were the first heat-seeking missiles because they were like the pit vipers, and they're supposed to fly right up the tailpipe of an enemy aircraft. Problem is, as long as it was during the daytime, the sun was out, and sometimes they just head on off for the sun. So they were trying to figure out a way to either filter out some solar radiation to make it not seem like a exhaust of a MiG or something like that. But I don't know why he had to go on expeditions to do that, unless he was just creative in the grant proposal or something to go on all these expeditions. Seemed like you could have just stayed out in your side yard and tried a couple of filters and just see what would work. But anyway, he got on all these expeditions. I already had that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Something went wrong. Okay. Well, I was on the board then, and that summer, and I think we have a difference of opinion as to the exact timeline here, but my recollection, and I'm sticking to it, is that I got a phone call from Michael that a professor at Vanderbilt had a telescope that he was getting rid of, and could we come get it? And for some reason, he wanted me to come along with him, and I think there are a couple of other guys did too. And I had to do some fancy talking to my folks to drive off to Nashville with a bunch of teenagers. But we did. We went up there, and I had my aunt worked for the newspaper, and I got some information from her on who the physics professors and astronomy people were at Vanderbilt. And I just had a list of them and what they were doing. And so when we went up there, I was all ready. I even had a question for the professor. And this turned out to be the professor, Carl Seifert. Well, we knocked on the door, and he opened it and came out. And I said, "Dr. Seifert, it's nice to meet you." And he said, "That would be Seifert." So that was my introduction to him. But he was very nice, and he took us out in the backyard where the telescope was, and it was basically a piece of junk. It had the tube was made of galvanized metal, folded around and soldered down one edge, and it had been sitting in the damp places for too long, and it was all rusted out. So I don't know if it was ungracious of us or what, but we took the mirror out of the telescope there and left the tube and brought just the mirror back with us. Well, later on, that mirror became part of a major telescope for our next upgrade in the observatories. This was made by one of our members named Billy Gooch, who was a machinist, and he could make anything. Not necessarily the best way to do it, but he could always make something that would kind of work. He made the telescope out of metal rods. Back here, this part was aluminum, but up front was stainless steel. And you can't really see the details that well, but the whole diagonal assembly is would slide on those stainless steel rods up near the front. So if you put a camera or a spectrophotometer or something on it, you could pop the focal length out to wherever you wanted, not by moving the mirror up, which is the way most people do it, but by moving the diagonal back. So it was a really good telescope. It had a very strange drive system. It was hydraulic. And on the wall, there was this piston that you could adjust the weights falling with needle valves. And then a metal cable went down through a pulley under the floor out to the middle of the observatory where the telescope was mounted and wrapped around a 2-foot diameter it would be a drive gear if it had gears on it, but it was the drive unit was pulled by that. And usually about the time you finally got it to where it would track properly, it was time to go home. But it was very, it was a unique thing. And this whole thing was written up in the May 1960 Sky and Telescope by Michael. He submitted the article to Sky and Telescope, and they printed it along with the picture of the observatory. And that's Billy Gooch there, and that's Michael there, and that's his pet lion, Dandelion. And the observatory, when we first started using it, had a lot of critters in it. In fact, we had eyepieces in a cardboard box, and if you opened up that box without kicking it first, there's liable to be a rat or a mouse or something that would come up out of it. So after the lions started patrolling the observatory, that pretty much went away. Now, experts will tell you that lions don't purr. Any big cat that roars can't purr. Well, she did a pretty good imitation, kind of a gurgling sound, but only on the outgo. So it was silence. It's sound like somebody trying to start a chainsaw. And after a while, the echoes inside that dome, it was almost like a helicopter flying around in there. But she was very friendly, rub on your legs, just like a little putty tap. Okay. Our president then, John Flippin, decided that he was not in favor of this observatory at all and didn't cooperate much at all. This was at 558 Sweetbriar Road, which at the time, the road was sometimes gravel, sometimes asphalt. It just wasn't consistent. And he said it was too remote and nobody'd go out there. Well, we swamped the place all the time and had a great old time with the observing from there. It was on a 9x9 concrete slab with kind of low walls, which meant the door entrances were very low. And I started out bumping my head on the door. And while I was still recovering from that, the shutters out front, I don't know if you see the picture here, those shutters, there were 2 of them, 30 inches across. One would slide back up here. The other would just hang down by these cables. And they were still within, notice he's squatting down there. If you stood up, you could run right into that, which I did a number of times. So that was one of the hazards there. Okay. I already told you about the drive there. Oh, yeah. In order to be able to use that telescope, you had to take an intensive course from somebody who knew how to do it and pass a test, a written test on it, and then a practical test where you had to work on it with somebody watching you. And then there was a logbook, and you had to put everything in it you saw, every last thing, and what eyepieces you were using, what magnifications, everything had to go into that logbook. And I already told you about the varmints and dandelion. Unfortunately, that telescope came to a sad end. We eventually, after Michael went off to around the world, we got the telescope and we put it in another observatory out in Collierville. And we used it there for a good while. A little more about that coming up shortly. But the telescope got stolen out of that observatory and probably dumped into the lake that was on that property. And I think we knew who did it, but nothing was ever done. More context here, early 60s. We had a big program at East High School. We got 3 astronomers or people from Huntsville. They're different expertises, but they were going to talk about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. And each one of them gave a particular talk. Again, we had 2 articles, one in each paper, leading up to it a week in advance, and they interviewed them by phone. And then the day of, we had 2 more articles, and the day after, we had 2 follow-up articles. That was 6 articles on this one talk that we had. There was the program. Each one of them, here, and here, each one of them gave a talk. And these were the people who put the program together down here. John Flippin, the president, S.A. McBroom, Sheffy, the vice president, George Turner, again, the one who gave the scout program that got me involved in the first place, and William Gaskell, who was an architect, and he was the treasurer. He was the firm of Yates and Gaskell, and among other things, they designed the stadium that's here, the Memphis Memorial Stadium, or whatever its name is now, Liberty Bowl and everything. So he was on that program. And here's they had pictures of it during the event, and those were in the paper the next day. And that's John Flippin and George Turner and 2 of the speakers, and the son of another one of our members. This is Mark Folis Jr. He was also an architect who was involved in one of our final projects. And of all the stuff they said that night, the press seminar guy homed in on dolphin may help man contact life on other planets. So not much of anything except that. It was kind of disappointing. Okay. This is my baptism by fire. There was a guy in the Astronomical Society, George Turner, used to go around and talk to scout groups, and he asked me to be his assistant on this particular evening, and he was going to pick me up and take me there. And all I had to do was hand out sky maps and point out constellations to the kids. Well, that morning, this article appeared in the paper. He had been picked up on a morals charge for molesting kids in the neighborhood. So I called Bill Gaskell before I even went to school and asked him if he could take me to the meeting instead. It was right across the street here at Evergreen Presbyterian Church, which is now part of the Rhodes campus. Evergreen Presbyterian, they had a scout troop there. And he said, sure, but you'll have to do all the talking because I don't know anything about this. Well, okay. So I worked up something and took it over there. And I don't remember a thing that I said, but it must have been okay because several of them started coming to meetings and it seemed to have gone over all right. But anyway, that was a heck of a way to get introduced to giving talks, is to have to fill in for somebody who was in jail. More context, early 60s, Beatles, LBJ, and lunar eclipse. They had this on the front page. And they even had a picture with me and my telescope, which is now white, and my brother. It says that they ready their telescope. It's not, it was my telescope on the Memphis Museum grounds. No, it was in my side yard, but they at least had the date of the eclipse, tonight's lunar eclipse. So that was right. Okay. Then we had another crisis. Our membership was down to 10 members because anytime anybody wanted to talk about something that was really deep into astronomy, it got nixed, and we had to just talk about the sky and little fluffy things, and people didn't want to turn out for that. So we got down to 10 members, and as it is now, there were 10 members on the board of directors, so everybody was on the board. And then one of them died rather unexpectedly. So we're down to 9, and we waited till the next meeting, and a fellow named Lawson Kidd, who worked at Camp Electric, was in there, and he was at the meeting, and he seemed to be very interested in everything. So we got him an application form and made him fill it out at the meeting. And he said, and we told him, come to the next meeting. It's 2 Friday nights from now, and we'll vote you in. And he said, oh no, I don't want to be there while you're voting on me. You might vote me down. So I don't think we're going to do that. So he came, got voted in instantly, and about 2 minutes later, we appointed him secretary. So now we're at least back up to then. Then we had kind of an infusion. Walker Hurd was the one who founded the computer programming at the State Technical Institute, and he had been in Los Angeles and built a telescope, an 8-inch, which was huge by our standards. He was elected president and strengthened the programs. He had me write the Constitution, which then we found out from our lawyer wasn't a Constitution. If you already have a charter, then it's got to be bylaws. So we just changed that. And it took us 4 meetings, but we got the bylaws done. And we also started on a merit badge program in astronomy that was rather in-depth. In fact, it got to the point where we were telling each other, a lot of our members don't know that. So we turned that into the short course that we had, and the merit badge test became the short course test, and that's how that got started. And within a year, we went back up to 50, which is kind of our default value it's almost like a universe constant or something. We always have about 50 members, a little bit. We also started the Collierville Observatory then, poured the slab that year. I have this habit of, I do my best work when I'm supposed to be doing something else. And I was supposed to be studying for a test in the library one afternoon, and I started drawing diagrams for a logo for the M.A.S. And you'll see some people with it on their shirts, and it's on a lot of our things. It was designed to show a star image, but with atomic orbitals or something, to show that we were doing sky watching astronomy through telescopes, but also getting into the physics of it. So that was
About how old were you then?
I was,
Were you in high school?
that was my senior year in high school. And that's when I started, as soon as we got the stationery, because I've been holding it up for getting the logo done. As soon as we got the stationery, I wrote to Sky and Telescope and sent them a few of my M.A.S articles, and they wanted to start printing them in the magazine. They did every month for 2 years. And then we started a series of articles in the Sunday Commercial Appeal. Walker Hurd and I wrote the articles, and as soon as we turn them in, they'd redo them, and we'd call each other up on Sunday afternoon and said, was this what we gave them? Were you there? Did you hear this? So anyway, this is one of their articles. They at least took a picture of us with that was Walker's 8-inch telescope. And we gave them a sky map to print. And the first thing they did was to put all the names in upside down. At least they put them all in the same way. So when you held it anyway other than the northern horizon, they were upside down or sideways. So they thought that was an improvement. And that Milky Way looked more like a interstate there. But anyway, I just had little dotted lines along it. But they did their thing, and we got some interest. People would call us up. Then we did some radio programs. Hal Smith was the program director at WMPS. It was a top 40 station, and he was a disc jockey, but he got promoted to program director, and he was interested in astronomy and lived across the street from Walker Hurd. So one thing led to another, and he had us come down there in the evenings and record 5-minute radio programs. And they aired at 9:30 on Sunday mornings, or so I'm told. I've never heard one of them on the air. But and then in July, we started our MeteorWrite, which continues to this day. There's a picture of it in this month's MeteorWrite. The way that started was Lawson Kidd, who had been the secretary, would write up the minutes of the board meeting and announce the next program and put it on our purple ditto machine and mail it out to everybody. And that was the meeting notice. Well, we got a new member, Jerry Walker, who decided he wanted to upgrade the MeteorWrite or the newsletter. And so he made 2 or 3 pages, and he called me up one Sunday afternoon and said, this thing is ready to run off, but I don't have a name for it. And shortly before that, John Lennon had said the Beatles with an A. So I said MeteorWrite with a W. And I could hear him typing. He was typing it right onto the Ditto Master as I said it. I said, no, I was just kidding. He said, it's too late now. Well, it is, and it's been that ever since. So that was how the name came about. In July, we did a lot of things this summer, 67, is after I left graduate school at Duquesne in Pittsburgh and came back to Memphis to start in at UT in September. And I had, for the first and only time before or since my life, I had nothing I had to do. So that was when I did the radio series and the Sky and Telescope articles and finished the Messier Guide. And we also did the next step on the Collierville Observatory. We built the walls. We never do anything fast. One year was the slab, next year was the walls, the next year was the roof. And then we, in September, Walker and I taught an adult education course at Memphis State in the evenings. And out of that one class, we got 3 really remarkable members. Orrin Miller, Ben Hudgens, and Dr. Bill Metzger signed up right after that. So that was worth doing, if only for that. And in May, Paul Wilson, he was an engineer for WMC television, and he was an amateur astronomer and an amateur radio guy. And he managed to get a huge dish of a receiver for radio waves. And he mounted this on the roof of his house out in Collierville. I think it's still there. He lived at 226 Peterson Lake Road, which butts right into Poplar. And right in his side yard, he had this enormous dish. The base was immense looking, and his neighbors wondered how high this thing was going to go up. Well, it didn't go up that high, but he had the dish on it. And one day in May, he sent me a telegram. I was up at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh at the time. And he sent me a telegram saying there's going to be an auroral display tonight and the next night, or the next night and the night after that is what it was, because he sent it to me as soon as he discovered a huge solar flare, lots of activity, and it was aimed right at us and it was about to hit us. So he sent me a telegram. A little guy with a Western Union cap came up to my dorm room and handed me the telegram. And this is a picture of his dish there, and that he discovered that with. He did a bunch of other things I'll quickly cover, but to finish that particular story, you know how I always do something when I'm supposed to be doing something else? This was my only first chance to see an aurora. The next day, and David, don't listen to this part, we had a final exam in advanced organic chemistry. And I had a choice to sit out and watch the aurora all night or study for the organic chemistry exam. Well, guess what I did? I watched the aurora all night. And I don't know what I got on that exam, but I got a C for the course, which is like an F in graduate school. But I had already applied and accepted to UT, so I was gone anyway, left town the next day, right after the exam. So that worked out all right. But he pioneered the moon bounce program. He was always getting his publicity, and he wrote an article and was interviewed for QST, the ARRL magazine for amateur radio operators. And he would bounce signals off the moon, and then 2.5 seconds later, they'd come back. And he had to convince a bunch of people who just aim it a little differently, and you don't hear them back again. Aim it this way, and there they are. And then he got fancy and started bouncing signals off the Perseid meteor trails. They were few and far between, like every couple of minutes, but he could get he bounced them off of the Perseids down to South America, and that they would send them back. And so we had connection going. It was kind of sporadic, but it was at least he pioneered that kind of effort. Then we finally did get a couple of female members. In fact, they'd been around a good while. And for those of you who are of the female persuasion and think things have always been like they are now, that was not the case back then. And this article, which was written by my aunt, by the way, the whole thrust of the article was they were members of the Astronomical Society, but isn't it cute that they do this, and they're girls, and they have a nuclear technician job at Baptist Hospital under their father, and the whole thing was just how remarkable it was. I even mentioned the powder puff derby that they were in and the airplanes they were flying. So they were kind of breakthroughs in the Astronomical Society. Okay, everybody knows what that is. Do you know why it's slanted like that? Well, one afternoon, Bill Gaskell, the architect, called me up, and his firm was designing this Memphis Memorial Stadium. And he said they wanted to fix it up where the home team would be looking out onto the field in late afternoon, whereas the visitors would be looking straight into the sun. And could I figure it out for them? And I said, well, okay, first you're going to have to tell me when the football season is, because that was not something I knew. I'm the world's greatest natural non-athlete, by the way. So he told me when the football season was and what time of the afternoon they were played. So I got out some charts and things and did the calculation, and sure enough, that's the way they built it, so that the home team was got a nice view and the visitors were squinting into the sun. Okay, we tried to make our mark again. We're two architects, Mark Folis and Bill Gaskell. We decided to design an astronomy center for Memphis. By that time, the Planetarium was getting kind of long in the tooth, and the Sweetbriar Observatory was kind of discontinued because the owner and operator were elsewhere at the time. And so we decided we needed to have a full-scale 50-foot planetarium, an observatory, and an auditorium. And the city even had the land set aside and gave it to us, or said they would do that if the project came to fruition. Is it Southern and Perkins? We had two locations. One is right where the Theater Memphis is now, and one is right across the street from that. So we could have had either one of those. And in May '66, it was approved by the school's superintendent and the city officials, and they would pay half the cost. So all we had to do was to write a government grant to get the other half. And back in those days, that was actually fairly easy because they had all this money for the education, and they would put it out for anything they thought was worthwhile. And this was the plan that we had with the planetarium, the observatory, and the auditorium, and the even Stonehenge-like monuments around. I think got a little better picture of that there. But that was the plan. That's right where the Theater Memphis is now, and the alternate site was right over there. So that was the plan that we had, and it was 50% approved. Well, then nothing much happened, and we only found out later on what had actually transpired. And that was that we weren't the only ones the city officials and the government officials were talking with. They also got hold of Dr. Taylor from Southwestern, and they had just opened their observatory here, and he was saying there was no need for another thing here. It would just duplicate efforts. So given that, it never materialized. So never funded. Okay, more context. Getting near the end here. Here was one of the strangest observing sessions we ever had. Every now and then, in fact, coming up soon, Saturn is oriented such that you can't see its rings. They're only a very thin thickness, and when they're edge on, you can't really see them except with a really big telescope. So that was coming up. And there was a lunar eclipse and the Perseid meteors all at once, August 11th then. So we had an observing session, and we had 500 people show up to not see the rings of Saturn and to see the moon disappear. And with all the lights around there, you couldn't really see any meteors, but we had 500 people and got some members out of it. Also that summer, I started writing articles for the Review of Popular Astronomy. And one of those is quoted in our, one of our pages online. I think it's the one that goes with the selling of the book. I believe that's where it is. But they reviewed it and thought it was wonderful and had me write a series of more articles. And that went on until we actually printed up the book, and then there wasn't really any need for it anymore. We printed another 500 copies of the Messier Guide and sold enough of them at $1 a piece to pay for the Collierville Observatory that we had just finished with the roof. Then we had another disaster. In 1969, members started reporting that they weren't getting Sky and Telescope. And it turns out I had a friend at Sky and Telescope and called him, and he said, you haven't sent any money in more than a year. And we called the bank, and we had $6.53 in the bank instead of the hundreds that we'd had from the book sales and dues and everything. So we removed the treasurer from office, and we got our lawyer to draw up a promissory note. He paid the first $50, and then we never saw him again. So that was a bad disaster. Then in July, we had the Apollo moon landing, 1969. And in 1970, we had a total eclipse. It wasn't total here, but it was in Perry, Florida. A bunch of us went there. It was 76% here in Memphis. We had a big expedition, including Southwestern with their big trailer full of equipment. And it was clouded out. Well, we got up that morning and it was all overcast. I said, don't worry, it's always like that here in the morning, but it burns off. And it did burn off, revealing another impenetrable layer of clouds up above that. And the locals were actually surprised and I think a little frightened when it went ahead and got dark anyway, because they thought we had postponed it, and it got pretty dark and the lights came on and everything. Okay, then one of our big projects, we had the National Convention of the Astronomical League here in 1971, August 18th to 22nd. And it was a very, very successful convention, and they all said it was the best program that they had ever had at a national convention. Well, it was because I screwed up. What I did was I wrote to everybody who was a columnist for Sky and Telescope and in astronomy departments all around the country. And I figured maybe at most half of them will even reply, and I might get 2 or 3 out of that. Well, every last one of them agreed to come and give a presentation. So we had a huge program. We had to keep a very tight schedule. I didn't make a lot of friends that day. And in fact, I was vice president of the Astronomical League then, and one guy was so mad that he blocked my advancement to president after that. That and the fact that I had a beard and long hair then. So, but anyway, these are some of the speakers that were there. You may have heard of some of them, especially the old timers. Those are all the ones that were there and gave presentations, as well as many just plain amateurs. Okay, by that time we had 67 members, and nearly all of them took part in this convention, which was wonderful. It was the biggest group effort I think we've ever had for anything. Then in 1972, shortly after we got married, my $200 a month graduate school stipend was getting kind of thin. So the museum director called me up and said that Bob Ritter, who was one of our founding members, was no longer able to continue the job as a planetarium director. And did I know of anybody who would be interested? And I said, yeah, I would. And he said, well, come on in and interview. So I did. And I had that job from 72 to 80. It started out in the old planetarium with the canvas dome. And then in 77, we installed the new one, the Minolta projector in the 50-foot dome. And that's the second place I left my mark in Memphis, besides the catty-cornered stadium, was if you go to the Memphis Museum and you go in the front door, the wall comes along there straight, and then it comes out and across and then back in again, kind of like where a snake is eating a rabbit or something like that. And that's because they were going to put in a 40-foot planetarium, but I talked them into a 50-foot, but the building was already way beyond changing anything except that one wall. So they made a kick out in the wall there to make room for the planetarium. So, okay, here we are back at the beginning again. This was when we had our 40th anniversary, and we had a big write-up in the paper about that. And Jack Taylor came there and gave a little presentation as well. And then 3 years ago in 2020, they ran this in the news of bygone days. The same picture you saw earlier with the 3 M.A.S. members in it. We're right in there with the Elvis's first concert and the VJ day at the end of World War II. We're now a part of history. So that was the way that wound up. Now, I got no more slides, but I got a couple of things I wanted to say. One of them is that there's some lessons. When you go through history, there are always some lessons. One of them is we ran into several major obstacles and serious problems, but somehow we kept going anyway. We had, I was going to say at the beginning, it's not going to be all daffodils and unicorns and rainbows and stuff. I gave you all the scandals and things we had, and we got through them. So that was one thing. The other thing is, you may have chuckled over Teenage Astronomy Club. You got to wonder if we could ever do this again. You know, if we suddenly went out of existence, like a big meteor comes down on this room, and is there anybody else? Is there a group of teenagers in Memphis who would form a teenage astronomy club, know enough to get some help from adults to change the name to be more inclusive, and on top of that, get it incorporated, build a planetarium and an observatory, and have it endure for 70 years? Not sure that could be pulled off again. So all the more reason that we should take really good care of what we got and get enjoyment and edification out of it ourselves, and pass it on to future generations. So that's yeah. Okay. If the food hadn't spoiled, we'd be.
Couple quick things here before we dismiss. First of all, if I can get Ann to come up here for just a second. And it's customary whenever somebody steps up to give a talk that I like to give a parting gift. So I'll do this here. And it's a Memphis Astronomical Society coffee mug. I assume you still drink coffee.
I never did, but I drink tea every day.
Tea,
so
there you go.
that'll do, yes.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And you spoke last month. I wasn't here. By the way, check out her presentation also. It's on the Rhodes College RockSat project that they're working on. Very interesting. I was out, did record it. It's on our YouTube channel. And again, thank you for giving that presentation. Also, the 60th anniversary is recorded and it's on our YouTube channel. Recording is not very good. Early days of the Memphis Astronomical Society, I was basically using my iPhone and not very good audio. However, it is extremely compelling. So I would encourage you to check that out. Anybody online to check that recording out also. Jon Buhler made it an appearance.
Yes, he did. And I figured those days were over, but then out of the blue, I got a call from Michael, and it wasn't out of the question.
And then Michael shows up to this meeting.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to have a meeting, it's another thing to experience living history. And I think that's what we experienced tonight. This presentation, this meeting tonight, the significance of it may not really sink in right now, but you go forward 10 years, and the 60th feels like last year. I don't know where the time goes. So
Well,
10 years goes by.
I know where some of it's gone, and some of y'all better be getting prepared for the 80th.
Well, you have an open invitation, so, but if you can't make it, we will understand. But you certainly have an open invitation to speak at that one as well.
I don't even buy any green bananas anymore, so I can't promise 10 years ahead. So.
Michael, thank you for showing up tonight. It's an honor to meet you, sir. It's such a-
Yay.
I'll conclude by saying this. You see it on our branding, you see it on our presentations now. The three individuals who started this as teenagers, Bob Ritter, Bob Allred, Jon Buhler, and it was the Teenage Astronomical Society. That's how I like to think of them. You know, they're always going to be remembered as teenagers. We get a little older as we age, things change, but really it's a group of teenagers who started this and still have that passion for astronomy. That's really what keeps fueling me personally to keep putting forth the effort. Let's keep this thing going for future generations. We've had some incredible people step up. Can't thank you enough for your efforts. For those of you who came out tonight in response to my personal invitation, thank you very much. This is a party, and Ann is going to direct us to where we're going for the refreshments. We got a lot of food tonight, and so if your doctor is giving you dietary restrictions, this is going to be a bad night for you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
Enjoy it.